basic prophetic ministry starts with being watchmen. We got to have the eyes of our hearts open. Those are our spiritual eyes. One thing that will help to open them is if we will look. And we will start asking the Lord, show us something about this person standing in front of me in the line. And then when he does, use it. Step out. Do something with it. But you don't have to be religious. You know, God is not nearly religious as a lot of his people try to be. You know, how did he prophesy to the woman at the well? He just kind of led her in a conversation. You know, the supernatural is supernatural. I've been translated before in my car. And I didn't feel anything. I didn't know it. All of a sudden, I just didn't. Where'd that truck come from? Where'd those cars? And I felt like I'd fallen asleep. I said, I must have fallen asleep at the wheel. Wonder how long I slept. Did angels keep the car on the road? You know, I was thinking all these thoughts, but that's how I felt. Like I didn't recognize this truck and these cars. And then I had just left Charlotte. I was on Highway 77. I hadn't even gotten to the city of Charlotte. And where I was going was Winston-Salem. So I had to go all the way up to I-40 and then go east on I-40 about an hour to get to where I was going near Winston-Salem. And I had just started, you know, on I-77 near here. And I look up, I'm at the exit I'm supposed to be taking on I-40. And my thought was, I slept 2 hours. I never dreamed I'd been translated. And then I looked at my watch. I thought I was going to be 2 hours late going to the meeting I was going to, because I'd gotten stuck behind an accident here. And by the time I got past that accident, I was 2 hours late leaving here, and it was a 2-hour trip. But I said I'd be there. I was going to try to be there even at the end of the meeting, and I got there on time. Didn't tell a soul. I said, how am I going to explain this? And but it was natural. It seemed so natural. Weren't most of the miracles that Jesus did things that, you know, I think C.S. Lewis said once, you know, Jesus turned the water into wine, but really there's no wine that was ever turned into wine from water, or that was turned into wine that didn't start as water. All Jesus did was speed up the process, so it happens right now. And a lot of miracles are that way. But they're hard to catch, hard to see. Sometimes you've got to be attuned to them. Words of knowledge can seem so natural. You know how most words of knowledge come? You feel something or think something in yourself. You may look at someone and think, well, that looks like Fred, so-and-so, or a person that you know, and then you look at them again, they don't look like anything like Fred. But when you look at them, you felt like they look like Fred. Something made you feel like Fred. Now that's a word, that's the beginning of a word of knowledge. Well, you've got his name now. He's a Fred. Ask the Lord for more. What are the characters? Is Fred a teacher, or is Fred of some profession that may relate to this guy's profession? You know, and just keep on down that trail. Practice this. You'll spook out a lot of people, but that's fun too. How do you know this? Where'd you get that? You've been spying on me? Whatever. People come up with all kinds of things, but usually you can get down to some way that you can touch them and minister to them. If it's a physical problem, you may feel in your body like you feel all of a sudden your kidneys hurt. And your kidneys aren't hurting. The Lord's giving you a word of knowledge for someone who has kidney problems. And when you practice that more and more, your prophetic muscle gets bigger. Your prophetic muscle grows with exercise, just like your muscles. And it's something we've got to get out and do. Now, it's hard to start, but once you start, it's going to be hard to stop. I remember did I tell you last month about when Wimber asked me to oversee one of his meetings at a conference? And I said, well, can I do anything I want? And he said, yeah, you can. It's your meeting. So I asked a friend of mine, Ed McGlasson. Any of you guys know Ed? He's a big guy. He was at one time the strongest man in the NFL. He's a monster guy. And I said, well, I'm going to invite Ed to help me. And he goes, are you crazy? John goes, are you crazy? You're going to turn Ed McGlasson loose in one of my meetings? I said, this may have been the first time I said this. I said, John, we may die of a lot of things, but I'm not going to die of boredom. I'm going to turn Ed loose in your meeting. So I got Ed McGlasson and Ricky Skaggs, who he was a country music singer. He's still a bluegrass singer, but I got Ricky, and Ricky had just started really stepping out in his gift and ministering to people. I said, well, I'm going to turn both these loose. And I remember Ricky gets up there. He had seen us sometimes call people out by their name or whatever. So he starts right away, your name is David. The guy goes, not my name. And Ricky sat back a little bit, and I said, Ricky, give him the rest of the word. So he told him everything else, and the guy said, that's exactly right. So then his faith is way up there again. He goes, your name's George. The guy, I said, Ricky, forget the names. Just give them the word. You don't have a name thing yet. And it was right on. And then Ed McGlasson comes up there, grabs the mic. He calls out a name that only God could pronounce again. I said, Ed, you guys can't even get a David and a George. What are you doing? And this is typical Ed. I mean, he was a faith man. He's going to jump out there, walk on the water. Well, a guy came up there, showed us his driver's license. It was that name Ed had called out. Well, then he really got out of control. And it was anointed. And God was using both of them. And Ricky and I were down on the floor praying for this woman, a crippled woman in a wheelchair. And here comes Ed flying off of the stage. And he lands right in front of that woman, and she jumped out of her wheelchair. I think he scared her out of the wheelchair. And I'm sitting there, we're going to get sued. He'll never turn me loose again, And that woman had postponed having her legs amputated to come to that meeting. They were totally atrophied, dead legs. She jumped out of her chair. I really do think it scared her out. But her legs strengthened, and she ended up pushing her wheelchair out of the meeting. She was completely healed. And other people got healed of extraordinary things, but it was messy. And usually when you start out, you've got to be willing to make mistakes. Most people use the excuse, I don't want to hurt anyone's faith. No, what you really mean is you don't want to be embarrassed by missing. You got to get past that. I don't know anyone that's walking in an extraordinary gift that didn't start out making some pretty big blunders and mistakes. And you just have to get by that. What it is, you got to lay aside your pride, and almost continually the Lord will help you to keep from getting proud. I know we've had so many meetings where we would get the most specific words, someone's name, where they were from, what physical problem they had or whatever, and call them out, and nobody responds. And we miss that. And it used to be when we first started the School of Spirit meeting, we had so much of that, but by Tuesday or Wednesday, that person had called and said, I was supposed to be at that meeting, and that word that you had, that someone told them about it, they said, that's me. Can you give me that word now? No. But one thing we learned, we can give it to them, but it needs to be in the time, the setting. But one thing we found out from almost every person that was one of those, that a word of knowledge was clearly for them, and they were supposed to be at the meeting, they let something stop them, prevent them from coming to the meeting that they should have overcome. And it told me how often we miss God because little things sidetrack us, knock us off the course. How easy the enemy can, cause us to miss the Lord and not be where we're supposed to be. Now, just a few years ago, and I'm talking about 3 or 4, the Lord showed me how much I had missed him in my life. He told me impatience was my greatest flaw and how much it had caused me to miss him. And he showed me divine connections I'd missed. He showed me miracles I had not seen, and all because of my impatience or whatever. I wasn't sensitive to the Lord, and I was just headstrong to do something else I wanted to do, how I'd missed him. And after he had shown me a little bit, I said, Lord, I must have only been in your will maybe 20% of the time. And I really felt that. And you know what he said? He said, that's about right. Then he said, that's way more than most of my people. Way more. Now there's the good and the acceptable and the perfect will of the Lord. I think to be there for the right divine encounter, to everything, what we want to do is get to that perfect will of God. I may have been in the good will. I may have been going out to do a good work for the Lord. And he'll bless just about anything we'll do in his name. We'll see the blessing of God on it, but he won't be there. He won't inhabit those things. And it could have been even better. It could have been one of the acceptable. It could have been a real work of the Lord, but it wasn't his perfect will. And a whole lot of that comes by learning to wait upon the Lord, to be sensitive to him, and to be willing to be embarrassed. Now, I've seen one person raised from the dead. And I've seen some great miracles. But one of the best, to me, the best I'd seen was a woman who was totally blind. And we used to make, jokes or make fun out of getting the words of knowledge about somebody here has a headache. The headache words. Everybody's got a headache. I mean, after your sermon was so dry, we're all hurting. But we had just before that meeting, some of us in the back room had been joking about that. So I get up there and ask the Lord, Lord, please give me a word of knowledge. And he says, someone here has a headache. I said, no way, Lord. You're joking. I can't give a headache word. He said, give it. And I knew he was serious. So I said, okay. I said, somebody here has a headache. And about 15 people raised their hands. And then he gave me another part. He said, it's affecting, whatever's causing your headache is affecting your vision. And anyway, there was only a couple of people that raised their hands then. And I went on, prayed for everybody. And then after the service was over, and I'm up front just talking to a few people, and a lady comes up and says, you need to talk to my friend. And I said, okay. I said, what's up? She said, well, I came here totally blind. I was completely blind. She said, I couldn't see anything but just a very light subtle, what looked like light up in the direction of the front. She said, that's all I could see. And then my head started hurting, and started hurting so bad. I asked my friend who drove me here to take me home. I can't sit here with this headache. And that's when I said, somebody here has a headache. And it got her attention. And then I said, it's affecting your vision. She just knew right then that was her. And she had the faith to get healed. But she didn't tell anybody. But I did see her during the meeting. I didn't know what she was doing, but I saw in the back pointing at things around the room. And she started to see the banners and things like that in the room, and she was pointing at them. And then when she came up, she had one of those tiny little New Testaments. She was reading it. She was able to read it, completely healed. Start with a headache word. Don't despise the small beginnings. The Lord likes to do things like that. I think he likes to make us look silly too. It's part of his agenda. Let him do it because he gives his grace to the humble. Just embrace the humility.